Good morning to everyone here in the room and everyone joining us across the country on the live webcast. My name's Doug King. I'm president of the Museum of Flight. Welcome to the Charles Simonyi Space Gallery. Charles is with us this morning. Charles, what a great day to talk about space. Did you have any idea that this would happen when you helped create this room? There are way too many people in the room to thank today for what's going on. You'll be meeting a lot of them, but I do have to introduce one person primarily responsible for the creation of this and so many other good things here at the museum, the chairman of the Museum of Flight, Mr. Mike Hallman, who's sitting right over here. You know, our mission here at the museum is to be the foremost educational air and space museum in the world. And what a better day to demonstrate what that's all about. You know, if you can join us later in the day across the bridge, you're going to find some of the most iconic aircraft that tell the story of the first century of flight, of the people who were brave enough after thousands of years of dreaming about it to step into the sky and change the world that we lived in. Just outside this door, you're welcome to join to look at the Air Force One, the Concorde, the first 747, the first 737, and really understand how far we've come in just a little over 100 years. But what we're probably most proud of is to use those artifacts and those stories of the people who designed and flew and changed our world to inspire that next generation, those young people that will write the story of the future as humankind steps off the planet. And so just beyond the tree line, on the other side of the iconic airplanes out here, you'll see some steel. That's Aviation High School, Raisbeck Aviation High School, coming out of the ground so that at this time next year, 400 young people will come to high school right here at the Museum of Flight. And I'm thrilled that that relationship is already paying off. You know, the high school exists now in a really difficult situation down near the airport, but they're great kids and a great faculty, and that doesn't slow them down at all. And 5 of them will be working as interns this summer for Planetary Resources. Can you imagine getting to work on what we're talking about today when you're in high school? And so we'll invite you back as this gallery is transformed into the place that tells the story of the last 30 years of space and what we learned and how we built the base for what we can talk about today. We won't be able to host many events like this because you'll notice some blue lines on the floor all the way from near the door over there to the window over there. That's the outline of something called the full fuselage trainer, the full-scale shuttle mock-up that will occupy this space beginning June 16th. We'll invite you all back when the crew compartment arrives. We got the first element behind you there just last week, one of the engine bells from the shuttle mock-up. And we'll be thrilled to be using that as an educational tool to tell the story of what people like Tom Jones and the other 350 people who flew on the shuttle accomplished in the last 30 years that now allows us to move forward. And we'll also be telling the story of the entrepreneurs, the commercial space folks, the explorers that will continue to push back the boundaries at NASA that will make that happen for all of us. We're really excited that that story has such a Seattle flavor to it. You know, when Lori Garver from NASA, the Deputy Administrator of NASA, was here for a Future Forum in December and introduced us to Planetary Resources and a lot of other young companies, we were struck with how many of them are here in Seattle. Lori used a way to think about this, that she said that probably an analogy that this is probably closer to what happened in the personal computer industry than anything else she could think of. There was a time in the late 70s when people would say to you, why would you want a personal computer? What would you do with it at home? And our paradigm changed a little since then. Well, today on the stage you're going to meet people who are rejecting the old paradigm of space and talking about how all of us will use it to change our planet. A lot of that's happening here in Seattle, as you'll learn today, and we're thrilled. Maybe we should start thinking of this as the Silicon Valley of space. Anyway, welcome. History will judge that, and today will be one of the milestones that it judges from. So we're here today to make a pretty exciting announcement. And let's get started by giving you an introduction in video to Planetary Resources.
everything we hold of value on Earth, metals, minerals, energy, water, real estate, are literally in near infinite quantities in space. Planetary Resources' mission is to gain access to the natural resources of space by mining near-Earth approaching asteroids. With technological advances that are coming out of exponential technologies and investors willing to bear the risk, small teams are now able to do what only governments and large corporations could do before. Our vision is to catalyze humanity's growth both on and off the Earth. We're breaking new ground. Now is the time for us to gain access to these resources. And at the end, the entire human race will be the beneficiary as we expand our reach beyond the Earth into the solar system.
We've been searching for near-Earth objects mainly to assess the hazard of an impact on the Earth. Turns out that most of these asteroids are not a threat to the Earth, but they do offer potential benefits. They're in Earth-like orbits that offer accessible resources that we can tap into, both for scientific knowledge and returning those strategic supplies to Earth.
Our plan for opening up the resources of the solar system is threefold. First, we're going to identify all of the most valuable near-Earth asteroids, where they are, what they're made of, and how to reach them. Second, we're going to develop the technology and the capability to transform those resources into valuable materials. And third, we're going to deliver those materials to the point of need, whether it's a fuel depot orbiting the Earth or elsewhere in space.
Our small and focused team will enable the commercial exploration of the solar system. We're using experts who've gained their experience in NASA and the tech industry, and we're keeping our goals simple and clear.
We have a need now for the knowledge of what's on these asteroids. There are potential resources in space, and the government is taking a scientific and measured approach to exploring them. We can really increase the knowledge that we get and the pace at which it comes back to us by involving commercial innovation and commercial visits to these asteroids.
We are going to change the way the world thinks about natural resources.
Conference here for the next hour. The press conference will last until about 11:45. You'll hear from all the speakers on the podium here, and then the press will have the opportunity to ask questions, as will those people watching online. We'll take a short break at about 11:45 where the press can ask questions more directly. The rest of us can use the restroom, which is to the right over here, and then we'll reconvene at 12 o'clock for lunch. Those of you staying for lunch will have a chance to hear Chris Lewicki and Tom Jones again, elaborating a bit on what we talk about in the press conference, then to ask questions of them. And at 1:30, we'll adjourn across the bridge to our gift shop where there'll be a book signing, Peter Diamandis and Tom Jones. So let's get on with it. Our first speaker today probably needs no introduction to this audience, but it's always a thrill for me to get to introduce him anyway. I first met Peter back in about 1995 when he was giving a talk in Washington, D.C. about something called the X Prize. He had just read Charles Lindbergh's book, The Spirit of St. Louis, and was thinking about what it takes to really incentivize innovation in any field, and proposed that maybe this is a way to get the rest of us to space. Well, you know the results of the X Prize and what Burt Rutan and Paul Allen did 8 years later. So Peter's thinking this way goes way back. He has an undergraduate degree in genetics and a graduate degree in aerospace engineering from MIT. A medical degree, a medical degree from Harvard. He wasn't busy enough doing all that, so he founded the Students for the Exploration and Development of Space, which now has chapters on campuses all over the country. He founded the International Space University, which now is a permanent campus in France, and recently founded Singularity University, a very exciting new project that all of us can participate in. On the company side, he's a founder of Zero G, of Space Adventures, and now, of course, of Planetary Resources, probably best known for being the chairman and CEO of the X Prize Foundation, which is addressing both space issues and human issues all over our planet. He's now a best-selling author of the book Abundance. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Peter Diamandis.
Thank you. Thank you, Doug. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here in this beautiful facility. And Doug, you know, the last time you and I had this kind of an interaction was really 16 years ago when I was under the arch in St. Louis, and here we are launching the X Prize. And you have to remember that here we were launching this vision of private spaceflight when that was not the norm. And we had a lot of doubters, a lot of people who said it was impossible. But 16 years later, there are thousands of people who are buying tickets and billions of dollars being invested. And now any one of us can buy a ticket to go to space. I have two. So my dream for space has been driven by this vision that I want to go and I want to enable others to go with me. And part of it is really the spirit of extraordinary writers and artists like Heinlein and Clarke and Bonestell, who envisioned what the future would look like. And since my early teenage years, I've wanted to be an asteroid miner. I always viewed it as a glamorous vision of where we could go. And ultimately, my passion about opening up space, and I know that of my colleagues, makes that vision of asteroid mining not only reality, but something that we need to do. So today, I am very proud, along with my colleagues here on stage, to be announcing Planetary Resources. The vision of Planetary Resources is to make the resources of space available to humanity both in space and here on Earth. Whether it's propellant from water on asteroids or strategic metals and minerals that are important to promoting and creating a world of abundance here on Earth. So as Doug mentioned, I have the pleasure of having written a book called Abundance, The Future is Better Than You Think. We hit number 1 on Amazon. We're 9 weeks on the New York Times list. And the book was a response of saying, you know, it's time to stop all this negative thinking. We are living into a world where individuals and small teams have the ability to do incredible things. Scarcity, which has been the model of the past, is contextual. And technology is an abundance liberating force. And whether it's abundance on metals and minerals and energy and real estate, these are the things in near infinite quantities in space. When I think about transforming that which is scarce to that which is abundant, I use the analogy of, say, an orange tree in my backyard. If all of a sudden I've plucked all of the oranges from the lowest hanging branches, oranges all of a sudden become scarce until I develop a technology as simple as a ladder that allows me to reach higher, and now oranges are abundant. For us, when we think about scarce metals, minerals, and such, as we move beyond the bounds of Earth to a solar system that is full of resources, we can bring those back to humanity. So some historical context, if you would. Just move this forward. If you think about what has driven human exploration over time, it really has been the search for natural resources, whether it's the exploration for 500 to 1,000 years ago from China, or the Europeans heading to the Americas in search of gold and spices, or the American settlers moving to the West in search of timber, land, gold, oil. These are the things that have driven us over the long term. So it is no surprise that now as we move into space, these are the things driving us today. We're going from a species that used to use only resources within a day's walk to a species that has access to resources on our planet, to a species now that has access to the resources in our solar system. So why is this the right time? Well, there are 5 critical elements I want to mention to you. Number 1, we're living into a day and age where exponentially growing technologies are enabling small teams of individuals to literally do what only governments and large corporations have done before. They're buying down the cost of electronics, of AI, of robotics that will enable for very small, very powerful, low-cost, low-power spacecraft. These are essentially the kinds of technologies that at Singularity University we study today. The second is the availability of commercial space launch. It's finally arrived. Multiple companies like SpaceX and Jeff Bezos with Blue Origin and Paul Allen with the Straddle launcher have invested and committed billions of dollars. These also demonstrate the ability of small private teams to do things that were only once in the realm of governments. The third powerful force are a new generation of risk-tolerant investors. So Eric's going to speak about our investors and who they are and why they're involved. But we're also seeing a new generation of centimillionaires and billionaires who are now investing in space. There are people like Elon and Jeff and Paul, who I mentioned, and Richard Branson in the launch industry. There are the dozens of extraordinary private individuals who are investing in the Google Lunar X Prize teams that are going to the moon. This is smart money investing in one of the largest commercial opportunities ever, going to space to gain resources for the benefit of humanity. The Earth is feeling a resource pinch, and ultimately, we have the ability to turn that which is scarce into abundant, and so now is the time that we need it most. Finally, we are living during a time when we are directly in line with NASA's policy. NASA's goal of extending human presence in space, of going back to the moon and Mars, and partnering with private companies to do things such as what Planetary Resources is planning to do, to help extend human presence in space. So I'd like to talk a little bit about how Planetary Resources got started. Eric and I have been business partners for over 16 years. We co-founded Space Adventures together. Eric was a part of the early team at Zero G and X Prize, and we've always shared the dream of opening up space. And it was a little over 3 years ago where we had a meeting and we sat down and said, what's next? Commercial private spaceflight has been great. It's working. We have thousands of people now buying tickets to go to space. But what's next? What's going to drive us beyond? And both of us found a passion for going to really hook our, if you would, our engine of opening up space to gaining access to the resources. This is the engine that will expand the economic sphere of influence beyond low Earth orbit, beyond geostationary orbit, to gain the resources of space. So people ask, can it really be done? How difficult is it? Let me say it can be done, and yes, it's very difficult. There's no question. We're talking about something which is extraordinarily difficult, but the returns economically and of benefit to humanity are extraordinary. So when I think about a proof case of what makes this possible, why do I believe this is doable? You know, recently at X Prize, we created a partnership with Shell to help underwrite our exploration of space. As I think about what Shell and the other exploration companies have done, they've literally created robotic cities on the bottom of the ocean, 5,000 to 10,000 feet below the ocean surface, fully robotic cities that then mine 5,000 to 10,000 feet down below the ocean floor to gain access to oil. These are commitments of $5 to $50 billion in each of these platforms. It's extraordinary what humanity can now do. For me, that kind of work makes going to the asteroids to extract resources look easy. So, in conclusion, as we look towards space for these resources, we really take a page from the playbook that's been used by humanity century after century, millennia after millennia, to go looking for these resources to help expand humanity's footprint into space. We're implementing the vision of great writers and thinkers like Tsiolkovsky, Heinlein, Clarke, and academics and visionaries like John Lewis, whose seminal book, Mining the Sky, helped set our vision. So I am very proud to be here on stage today announcing this company, and I'd like really at this point to introduce one of my closest friends, an extraordinary business partner, Eric Anderson. Eric and I have known each other for 16 years. He is the co-founder and chairman of Space Adventures, and I really want people to realize the extraordinary work he did there. He has gone out and privately sold over $500 million of human spaceflight missions as part of that company, an extraordinary feat. He is the CEO of Intentional, a company headquartered here in Seattle, which is a pioneer in the future of software, where he's working with his partner in the Microsoft chief architect, and of course Planetary Resources investor, Charles Simoni. Finally, along with me, he is a proud co-founder and co-chairman of Planetary Resources. Would you please all welcome Eric Anderson.
Okay, well, this is super fun. The day, so when I was a student studying aerospace engineering at the University of Virginia, I could only have imagined the time when I would stand in front of an esteemed audience and talk about the launch of an asteroid mining company backed by some fabulous financiers and entrepreneurs and visionaries, and working with some of the greatest people in the world. So it's a real privilege and a dream of mine to be here in front of you talking about this, and I hope you'll share this spectacular moment with me. I have absolutely no doubt that the announcement of this company will be a seminal event in the future of entrepreneurial space and in moving off the planet. Not necessarily because I think this company will be the most successful. I certainly hope it will be, and we're going to work to do that. But because I'm sure there will be many who follow. And as we have started the market and the move towards commercial human spaceflight, this will now create a new industry that's even bigger by an order of magnitude or 2 orders of magnitude, and that is the industry of what we need, of resources, of energy, and moving from an industry where that exists on the planet to one where it exists in the solar system. So we're now going to bring the solar system within our economic sphere of influence. And so I'm going to talk to you about the business side of this for a little while. We're going to talk about four areas. And at first I'm going to tell you about the value of asteroids. So if we're standing here up in front of you considering this grand adventure to talk about resources from space, why is it and how is it that we came to understand and to believe that the asteroids were a great place to start? And the fact is that asteroids, coming from the very, very early part of the solar system, the very formation of our solar system, have existed for literally billions of years and have some of the most interesting and valuable materials that we will need, not only in the future in our future in space, but also for our future on Earth. Okay, and so let's talk about that. So first of all, asteroids are, first of all, the main belt of asteroids exists between Mars and Jupiter, and as Tom Jones will tell you, there are literally millions and millions of asteroids in the main belt, but we're not talking about those today. We're talking about the near-Earth asteroids. So these are asteroids that exist in co-orbital locations close to the Earth as they orbit the Sun in let me make sure I can click slides here, in locations that are easy to reach energetically from the Earth, in locations that are not far and certainly not nearly as far as the asteroid belt. And of the near-Earth asteroids, there are really two types, or at least two main categories of materials that we think are extremely valuable. So the first is water. Okay, so water in space, as you will come to learn, is perhaps the most valuable of the materials that we will use and find in space. Obviously, it's something that's critical to our life on Earth, and of course it will be critical to our life in space. But what we also need to realize is that water and its constituent elements, hydrogen and oxygen, are the most efficient forms of rocket propellant and rocket and oxidizer. Fuel and oxidizer, the space shuttle, of course, ran off of liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. It is the best rocket fuel out there. And so being able to go to asteroids and mine them for water provides us not only, as I will show you right here, not only with the ability to support life in space, drinking water, food, growing food, protection from radiation in space, but also propellant, fuel, and oxidizer that will allow us to open up deep space for human and robotic exploration, to drastically reduce the cost of space exploration. So we'll come to that in the concluding remarks. The second most valuable materials that we're going to find in space are the precious metals and the materials that are very difficult to find on Earth. we have a joke at Planetary Resources, and that is that, hey, what's the big deal? We've been mining asteroids for centuries. We've been mining them on Earth. That is because the areas on the Earth's surface where we will find platinum group metals, for example, are areas of asteroid impact. They're places where asteroids struck the Earth millions and millions of years ago, and there are still tiny remnants of platinum group metals. Platinum group metals do not occur in the Earth's crust. By the way, these are some of the most expensive materials known to man. We're talking about $1,500 an ounce. Okay, so it pales, the cost of a pound of platinum is actually far more expensive than the cost to put that pound into space. And there are only a few things for which that is true. So the platinum group metals are something that will be extremely valuable for the future of humanity. These are materials that are very useful in all sorts of industrial applications, and all those industrial applications in which they are useful have to reserve for only the most important part of that element, whether it's a catalytic converter, a medical device, or some sort of microelectronic. They have to reserve the tiniest amount because it's such an expensive metal. And so as we go into the future and bring back eventually these platinum group metals, we will create abundance. And we will be in a position not unlike if you go back and look at the history of aluminum 200 years ago, where aluminum was the most valuable and in fact the most treasured metal because we had so much of it on the Earth, but it was inaccessible. We didn't know how to extract it from its oxides. And so once we figured out how to do that, it became abundant. And now if you look out here in Boeing Field, we build airplanes and cars, and it's all over the place, aluminum, because it's useful. And the platinum group metals will be no different. So we will bring the ability to access these metals into our economic sphere of influence. And so asteroids are very high in both of these kinds of materials, among many others. Obviously, you've heard about asteroids and the nickel content and the iron content, and all these things will be useful, but in particular the water that will fuel an in-space economy, and then the most rare and precious of the metals, which we will eventually bring back to Earth. So let's move on to the second point, which is our plan. So we want to talk about how are we going to do this? What is the plan for asteroid mining? So there are really three parts to the plan for asteroid mining. We have thought and gathered together the most experienced and intelligent people, at least a group of these people who have done deep space robotics. Our team includes people who've landed spacecraft on Mars. We have talked and thought about the most important pieces of technology that will enable us not only to go to the asteroids, but to eventually extract resources from them. And so we have a detailed technology roadmap that we will use to get there, and we're going to develop these capabilities. And Chris Lewicki, who's our chief engineer, will get into the details of some of these capabilities and the kinds of things we're talking about. But overall, we have created a line of spacecraft. So the line of spacecraft is called the ARKYD line. And Chris Lewicki will tell you more about that line of spacecraft. But the ARKYD line of spacecraft will be used for first prospecting and then extraction. So as we talk about the phases of our business, phase one is to fully develop our technology base and start with our initial line of spacecraft, which we will be launching within 24 months. Second, did you like that? As a brief aside, I love that you did that because this company is not about paper studies. This company is not about thinking and dreaming about asteroid mining. This company is about creating a space economy beyond the Earth. It's about building real hardware. It's about doing real things in space to move the needle forward, not just talking about it. We've done enough of that. There's plenty of talking. We're about doing. And so we want to be held accountable for that. We want to generate interest all around the world and have the public follow us as we really work to do a very hard thing, which is to create robots that go into deep space and learn to remotely mine asteroids. And so we're going to do that. It's going to be very difficult, but we're about doing it. And there will be times when we fail. There will be times when we have to pick up the pieces and try again. But we're going to do it. We're not going to talk about it. We're just going to do it. And so moving on to the second phase, we have the second phase of our business, which is prospecting. So there no mining effort, no extraction effort could be complete, of course, without choosing where you want to go. Now, as of this morning, there are 8,931 near-Earth asteroids that we know of. Is that right, Tom? Okay. So we have a population of almost 9,000 near-Earth asteroids. which represents, by the way, my friends, 1% of the near-Earth asteroids that are larger than 50 meters. So there are almost 500,000, there are between 500,000 and 1 million asteroids that we expect to find out there over time that are greater than 50 meters and that are close to us in terms of the near-Earth capability. That's an extraordinary amount. We only know 1% of them right now. And so our first phase beyond the development of our technology is to prospect. We're going to do it by launching a space telescope, a series of space telescopes, which are our ARKYD 100 series, which you're going to see. And then we're eventually going to launch swarms of spacecraft using our ARKYD 300 series to these targets as we characterize them, as we learn about them. And eventually, into the third phase, which is the extraction phase, we're going to decide, based upon the characteristics that we find out in the prospecting phase, exactly where we're going to go and what we're going to do. And so, and which asteroids we're going to go after in terms of extraction. And so we'll look at things like, what exactly are the materials that we find on them? Okay, where are they? Where are they located exactly? What's their state vector? What's their spin rate? Okay, what are the markets? By that time, when we're talking a few years out here, after we've had a chance to do the prospecting, where are the missions? Does NASA need gas stations on the way to Mars, or on the way to the asteroids, or on the way back to the moon? What are the markets we're talking about? What are the periodicity of these asteroids? Some of them are in great orbits, but they don't come around often enough, or they're in low energy difference orbits, but they don't come around often enough. So we need to study these things and really understand what are the top targets. And once we have those targets, that's when we're going to go and begin to extract. So let's talk about number 3, which is who has made this possible. So I'd love to go into much more detail with you on our plans, but suffice to say that we're at the beginning. We're already beginning to build hardware, but we're still at the very, very beginning of what we're doing here. And I would like to just take a moment to thank and talk a little bit about each one of our investors, or at least a partial list of our investors who've made this possible. So we've been very fortunate over the years to get to know some of the most incredible, passionate, visionary people who have started not only companies but industries, and who also share a passion for space. And so one, of course, we have to acknowledge first is one of my very close friends and business partners, Charles Simoni. Charles has had the pleasure and honor, and we've had the pleasure and honor at Space Adventures of launching him into space twice. I am super, super proud and super honored to have come to know Charles. And as you can see from the building in which we sit, Charles really does give back and has a dedication to the future, not only for education, but also for believing in us enough to help us try to create this new industry. And so we also have been fortunate enough to include in our company 2 of the key people at Google. So we have Larry Page from Google, who is just one of the most brilliant people and greatest entrepreneurs of our time. Eric Schmidt from Google, who is not only an advocate of space exploration, but also of the deep seas, and truly an explorer at heart. We have a number of other individuals. I'm not going to have a chance to go through all of them. One of my really close friends and somebody who's been sort of watching us from the start is Ross Perot Jr. Many of you obviously know his name and the fact that his father ran for president, but Ross was the first person to fly a helicopter around the world. He flew a helicopter around the world, and his helicopter hangs in the Air and Space Museum. He's a huge advocate of space and aviation, and very honored to have him involved with our company. In fact, I believe we're going to be able to take a call from Ross here during the Q&A session, so we'll be able to hear from him a little bit. I'd also like to acknowledge Rena Shulsky. It's not a name that you've heard. Rena is an entrepreneur. She's a developer. She lives in New York City. She was our first investor. She goes way back into the days of Space Studies Institute and following space, and she was our very first investor, and she will always have that recognition, and I'd just like to honor her today for making that first commitment to Planetary Resources. So I'm very thankful for our investors. I could tell you stories about all of them, but at the end of the day, when we sat down and talked to them, they said there's really 3 things that we're excited about. Number 1, Eric, despite the fact that you and Peter are good salesmen, we know there's a lot of risk in what you're doing, okay? You can tell us how great it's going to be, but we know that there's a significant probability that we may fail, okay? Because we're trying to do something so audacious, everything could line up great, and then there could be an event where we fail. But we believe in it anyway, because we believe that attempting this and moving the needle for space is worth it. So we believe in that. Number 2, we believe in your team. The engineers that you've attracted, the people who have landed spacecraft on Mars, who have deployed tens of millions of chips out into the world coming from Intel in a real industry, these are the people who can actually make this happen. It's not going to take hundreds of people. It's going to take a few dozen people to do this. So we believe in that team. And number 3, of course we're interested in making money. If it's successful, we hope to make a lot of money. But we're not interested, we understand that's not going to happen overnight. Okay, we do understand that the pot of gold at the end of this rainbow, if it is successful, will be big. And so those are kind of the 3 points that we heard from our investors, and we believe those are great points, and we're very thankful for that. And so finally, as I wrap up my comments here, and as we conclude, I'd like to just say that I think I've been blown away by the fever pitch, if you will, of the media the last few days. It's been amazing to watch the blogs, the commentary, the speculation out there in the world about what are these guys up to? Is this for real? Are you kidding me? It's been amazing, and all except for maybe 5 or 10% of the comments you see out there of the reaction that people have is super positive. People, I think, have been very excited about even the idea of a possibility of asteroid mining. And the good news is that actually what we're talking about here and the pathway we're putting forward, I think, is even better than people thought. Because if we're able to successfully deploy and mine for water, we're going to create a network of propellant depots, of gas stations that literally open up the roadways to the rest of the solar system. So it's going to drastically reduce the cost of deep space exploration. Second, if you go and study and look at the estimates of resources and elements and their peak rates and how much reserves we have as a world, you might be shocked to find out some of the very common and needed elements that are getting pretty low here over the next couple decades. And so we hope to create through these asteroids, through the development of space resources, a future where we can count on having space resources enable our abundance and our future generations of prosperity right here on Earth. You know, we see the future of Earth as a Garden of Eden, as a place where we take care of the Earth and we protect the environment and we do our heavy industries and our mining and all that sort of stuff in space. These asteroids, as Tom will tell you, have lifetimes of 30 million years. They're not out there forever. They come and go. It's a very interesting cycle, and we need to grab them, quite frankly, before they do some damage to us. And we can use those asteroids to grow our prosperity for the future. And so as I'm wrapping up here, I'm really excited for you to listen to my colleague, Chris Lewicki. Chris has been a friend for 20 years. Chris and I have known each other since the early days of space, of the Students for the Exploration and Development of Space, SEDS. And I was running the University of Virginia chapter, and Chris was the national head, and we sort of went in different directions, and Chris took the path of very quickly ascending to the very top of the robotic space exploration programs at NASA, at the Jet Propulsion Lab. And when Peter and I started this company, we sat down and we thought about, man, this is a big challenge, and it's going to be a lot of tough stuff to talk about and to do. Who do we really get to run the technical part of this? I mean, who could it possibly be? And we both looked at each other, and we said, there's one person who can do it, and it's Chris Lewicki. We had no doubt in our minds that he was the guy, and when we called him up and said, Chris, it's time, let's go do this, that's where we got to where we are today. And so I'd like to welcome you, Chris. Come up here, my friend, and share with us some of your vision for the future.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Chris Lewicki, and I'm an asteroid miner. I'm very excited to be here today to introduce our philosophy, our roadmap, and our people. And as Eric was remarking, landing things on Mars and the great things that both Eric and Peter have done, we've all been involved in things that are exciting, things that create wonder. But in the last few days, I've realized that we've all been waiting for something that creates hope. So let me tell you about that today. Planetary Resources' goal is to develop the resources of space. And in order to achieve this goal, we're going to need to dramatically reduce the cost of space exploration and specifically asteroid exploration. We're going to combine the best practices of aerospace. We're also going to take a Silicon Valley style of innovation to create robotic explorers that cost 1, maybe 2 orders of magnitude less than current systems. So, what's being done today in space? We've gone to asteroids, we've visited them. But it's costed us hundreds of millions of dollars, upwards of $1 billion in some cases. And we're going to do it for tens of millions of dollars. And we're charting a path that gets us to single-digit millions per prospecting spacecraft. That's 2 orders of magnitude or a factor of 100 lower. And that is out there. That is bold, that is crazy, and that's what attracts me to this, because those are the types of advances that we need. Those are the things that are going to kind of raise the capability for everyone and give everyone better access to space. Our economy has shown that innovation in cost and innovation in market, those 2 things are every bit as important as innovation in capability. We're creating simple, elegant designs that can be executed by our small, very focused, and very expert team. And although we'll hold ourselves to the highest standards, we're going to aggressively take and accept risk where it's appropriate. Our philosophy will allow for the rapid development of commercial interplanetary space exploration. So, actually, I'm going to take a break and get some water. When Kennedy said, "Let's go to the moon," we didn't start the next day and say, "Let's design a moon lander." We knew very little about the moon. All the technologies that were going to enable that had, in many cases, yet to be invented. So how did we start? We started with robots. We started with a series of spacecraft, names like Ranger, Lunar Orbiter, Surveyor. We had 9 Rangers and 5 lunar orbiters and 7 surveyors, and many of them failed. And if at first you don't succeed, try again. But we had a campaign of learning about the moon, and we launched one after the next, and each of them advised us how to make the next one better. And from that experience, we learned about the moon, and we learned about how to explore the moon, and that enabled the Mercury program, the Gemini program, and ultimately the great and tremendously inspirational success that was the Apollo program. So through that, we as a nation proved our technologies, we tried out different strategies, and we also tested our team. So Planetary Resources will do the same thing to develop our technologies to access the resources of space. So our first series of prospecting spacecraft is the ARKYD series. And the ARKYD series is what does the prospecting. We've been working on the ARKYD 101, and the 101 operates in low Earth orbit as a commercial space telescope. And we've actually got the 102 on the stage next to me here today. Rapid cycles, responding to different addresses, different needs, and creating a capability that is able to learn from the previous generations. And the great thing about our 100 series is that the derivative uses that our customers are going to find for it. We, Planetary Resources, will use this capability to look out to the asteroids, find our targets, characterize them, learn more about them. But it'll also be used to look back to ourselves here on Earth. And it's got a whole bunch of interesting features: arc-second resolution, modularity, redundancy in numbers. We'll use it as a demonstration platform for the communication technology that will let us go out to deep space. It'll be operated not only by ourselves, but PhDs, and it'll be accessible all the way down to school children. And in the configurations that we build, we'll take advantage of the many different rides that get us into space. So in many ways, I believe Doug mentioned the personal computer. Our 100 series and what follows it is a lot like the personal computer. It's a personal space telescope that will make a once rare tool available for an entirely new audience, much like the PC did in moving us from the mainframe and putting a powerful tool in the hands of everyone. After the 100 series, we'll build the 200 series. It'll include the capability to leave the Earth and make our initial technology demonstration missions with Earth-approaching asteroids. And as Eric mentioned, we'll begin the direct prospecting activities with the 300 series, targeting multiple asteroids using swarm spacecraft expeditions. And what is a swarm? A swarm expedition is a half a dozen spacecraft collaborating to learn more about our target asteroid, distributing the risk among multiple spacecraft and allowing us the opportunity to do things that couldn't be done with just one spacecraft. We'll draw on innovative techniques that have been invented in the last decade, like cloud computing. We'll leverage cognitive science and other techniques to achieve an unprecedented level of autonomy. And this has been a theme we've been talking to you about this morning. We know this is hard. We know it's difficult. We know we're not always going to succeed. And when failure is not an option, success gets really expensive. We're approaching risk in a new way for space exploration. With our swarm expedition, we're taking safety in numbers. We will live with and we will learn from our failures. And based on what we've learned, we'll implement the next series, which will begin the material collection and processing in support of asteroid mining. With our ARKYD series, we're doing many things that have been done before, but we're doing them in a way that has never been done before. So I've spoken a little bit about technology, spoken a little bit about our spacecraft, but really, it's about our people. We're building a new kind of company, a new kind of spacecraft team. Our people are making all of this happen. You've already met Eric and Peter, our industry-starting co-founders. You've learned of some of our visionary investors. The engineers who are implementing our vision have the highest levels of experience in the most difficult exploration the world has yet done, landing spacecraft on another planet. And we're about to do that again here in August, and many of our team have participated in that effort. We're taking their experience that was gained from an investment made by NASA over the last 50 years in the exploration of space, and we're applying that knowledge to new applications in the private sector. But our team isn't just rocket scientists. Many of the exponential advancements in technology that we enjoy today were refined and progressed in the private sector, in areas such as consumer electronics, medical devices, even the automotive industry. Drawn from these areas of experience that have rapidly developed in the recent years, our team is taking today's technology and reaching deeper into space. So our small team, with its focused goal and a simple spacecraft, will achieve our innovation and cost. You can meet more of our team by visiting our website and hearing their story. So what's different in this day is that our team does not need to do it alone. In the last decade, we've witnessed the power of the connected mind. Wikipedia, distributed science, incentive prizes, do-it-yourself or DIY, all these things are changing the way that we solve problems and the way that we work together and the way that we move forward. And in the last few days, since news of our company has gotten out, we have been absolutely overwhelmed by the thousands of messages and the volunteers who want to help change the way space is explored. So, in the near future, we've got your information. We'll be in touch. We'll be reaching out, and this year and in the years to come, we'll be working together as a planet to make this happen. So our advisors, we're very privileged to have advisors who share our vision and who are leaders in their fields. I realize I haven't been advancing. Oh, someone's advancing through my slides for me. James Cameron has been in the news stories. James Cameron is a consummate explorer. You're familiar with what he's been doing, the depths of the ocean, and his interest expands into the depths of space. General T. Michael Mosley, who's a former member of the Joint Chiefs and Chief of Staff of the Air Force. Dr. Sarah Seeger is a professor of physics and planetary science at MIT. Dr. Mark Sykes is on our advisory board, and he's the CEO and director of the Planetary Science Institute in Tucson, Arizona. And David Vaskovich, who is a former CTO of Microsoft. But Peter had mentioned it, and there's one person I'd like to call out special attention to. I think he's back here, Dr. John Lewis. And this is his life's work, and he's written extensively about it. And he's had this great idea all along, and we're going to make it happen. And John is joining us on our advisory board, and we're excited about the future we're going to create. So I was a student of John's at the University of Arizona when he taught a planetary science course. And my friend and colleague, Dr. Tom Jones, is also a student of Dr. Lewis's. Tom is a veteran astronaut, an author, and a planetary science, and he's going to tell the next part of our story. Thank you.
Thanks to this great team for inviting me here today. It's a pleasure to be with these gentlemen up on stage and also with the rest of the Planetary Resources team. I've been to a lot of launches, some pretty exciting ones. I don't think I've been to one that's been as significant, though, for the future of our society and for our future exploration and residence permanently in space. When I was in the shuttle program, I looked for water on the surface of the Earth. We looked at water resources, snowpack, ice cover with the Space Radar Lab, doing remote sensing of our own planet. When I was a student with John Lewis back there, I was doing remote sensing of asteroids, looking for water on their surfaces, the very resources that we've been talking about this morning. When I went to the space station, I saw the cost of bringing water to our outpost in space today. We hauled up more than a ton of water on the space shuttle at $20,000 a liter. So it's very dear material, and it's vital that we find more resources than just the Earth for supplying our teams in space. And so today with the team that's here, I'm going to get to participate with you in starting to break the bonds of Earth by harnessing these resources that await us in space on the nearby asteroids. I've got a slide here of the inner solar system. You can't see it very well, but imagine the main asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Earth flies around the sun every year in a swarm of nearby objects, nearby asteroids and some near-Earth comets. There are literally millions of these objects that come close to us. We mentioned the known population of about 9,000 asteroids, nearby asteroids that have been detected so far, but that's just a fraction, just about 1% of the ones that are truly out there. From the large asteroids that can do us in terms of global damage to our society, there are about 900 of those, and we've found most of those already through NASA's search programs. We range all the way down to the far more numerous smaller asteroids, which number in the millions. For example, there are about 500,000 to a million 50-meter objects, as Peter and Eric mentioned. So this is the resource that's out there. They live for about 10 million, 30 million years in the inner solar system before a planet runs into them or they get ejected from the solar system by Jupiter's gravity. Because they run into our planet in particular, that means that their orbits come quite close to us. And so there's a small fraction of the asteroid population which is accessible in terms of rocket power. Some of the nearby asteroids have Earth-like orbits in terms of shape and eccentricity or the ellipticity of the orbit. And those asteroids are the inviting targets for robotic and human exploration. And we think, for example, of those objects around 50 meters and larger in diameter, there are probably about 1,500 that a human could make a trip to in 6 months or so. NASA's looking at that number and that population. Of course, we're talking about robotic exploration, so we can go to much more distant asteroids than just those that are reachable by human beings. So that's the resource. And we have to find out more about these asteroids, detect them, learn about their characteristics. Just to give you a sense of what they look like, you know that we've sent a couple of spacecraft to nearby asteroids. Here's 433 Eros, which was visited by NASA in 2001 with the Near Shoemaker spacecraft. It's about the size of Seattle or Manhattan. I was actually doing a spacewalk on the space station when we landed the Near Shoemaker spacecraft on this object. I thought what a marvel it would be to have humans someday working on these objects, not just on a space station, and here we are today making that process become reality. Look in the right of the picture, you see a small little peanut-shaped object. That's a smaller cousin, much more numerous asteroid cousin of Eros. It's called Itokawa, and the Japanese visited there in 2005. It's about 550 meters across, about a third of a mile, and you can see the boulders and loose material on the surface. We think there are about 2,000 objects about a half a kilometer in size in the near-Earth population. This one's a rubble pile. It's just held together very weakly by gravity. And if we look at it in close-up, we see the surface of Itokawa as imaged by the Japanese Hayabusa spacecraft. There's a car there for scale. Our robots will be a little bit smaller than that one. But that's the kind of bouldery, loose material that we'll find on these medium-sized asteroids. These are called rubble piles. It shouldn't be too hard to invent a machine like a snowblower that can scoop up some of this material in the future. So there's plentiful loose material on these objects, and of course there are many more smaller ones than big ones. Now, some of these asteroids, as I've mentioned, have been detected about 1% of the population. They are difficult to find from Earth for a number of reasons. First of all, they're typically smaller objects. More numerous objects tend to be the smaller ones in this population. So from Earth, on the right side of the screen, we can only see these objects when they come close to us in their orbits, when they can reflect enough sunlight so that we can detect them in our ground-based telescopes. Of course, with ground-based telescopes, you can only see them at night.
And today will be one of the milestones that it judges from. So we're here today to make a pretty exciting announcement. And let's get started by giving you an introduction in video to Planetary Resources.
Everything we hold of value on Earth, metals, minerals, energy, water, real estate, are literally in near infinite quantities in space. Planetary Resources' mission is to gain access to the natural resources of space by mining near-Earth approaching asteroids. With technological advances that are coming out of exponential technologies and investors willing to bear the risk, small teams are now able to do what only governments and large corporations could do before. Our vision is to catalyze humanity's growth both on and off the Earth. We're breaking
of the people who designed and flew and changed our world to inspire that next generation, those young people that will write the story of the future as humankind steps off the planet. And so just beyond the tree line, on the other side of the iconic airplanes out here, you'll see some steel. That's Aviation High School, Raisbeck Aviation High School, coming out of the ground so that at this time next year, 400 young people will come to high school right here at the Museum of Flight. And I'm thrilled that that relationship is already paying off. You know, the high school exists now in a really difficult situation down near the airport, but they're great kids and a great faculty, and that doesn't slow them down at all. And 5 of them will be working as interns this summer for Planetary Resources. Can you imagine getting to work on what we're talking about today when you're in high school? And so we'll invite you back as this gallery is transformed into the place that tells the story of the last 30 years of space and what we learned and how we built the base for what we can talk about today. We won't be able to host many events like this because you'll notice some blue lines on the floor all the way from near the door over there to the window over there. That's the outline of something called the full fuselage trainer, the full-scale shuttle mock-up that will occupy this space beginning June 16th. We'll invite you all back when the crew compartment...
New ground. Now is the time for us to gain access to these resources. And at the end, the entire human race will be the beneficiary as we expand our reach beyond the Earth into the solar system.
We've been searching for near-Earth objects mainly to assess the hazard of an impact on the Earth. Turns out that most of these asteroids are not a threat to the Earth, but they do offer potential benefits. They're in Earth-like orbits that offer accessible resources that we can tap into, both for scientific knowledge and returning those strategic supplies to Earth.
Our plan for opening up the resources of the solar system is threefold. First, we're going to identify all of the most valuable near-Earth asteroids, where they are, what they're made of, and how to reach them. Second, we're going to develop the technology and the capability to transform those resources into valuable materials. And third, we're going to deliver those materials to the point of need, whether it's a fuel depot orbiting the Earth or elsewhere in space.
Our small and focused team will enable the commercial exploration of the solar system. We're using experts who've gained their experience in NASA and the tech industry.
Good morning to everyone here in the room and everyone joining us across the country on the live webcast. My name's Doug King. I'm president of the Museum of Flight. Welcome to the Charles Simonyi Space Gallery. Charles is with us this morning. Charles, what a great day to talk about space. Did you have any idea that this would happen when you helped create this room? There are way too many people in the room to thank today for what's going on. You'll be meeting a lot of them, but I do have to introduce one person primarily responsible for the creation of this and so many other good things here at the museum, the chairman of the Museum of Flight, Mr. Mike Hallman, who's sitting right over here. You know, our mission here at the museum is to be the foremost educational air and space museum in the world. And what a better day to demonstrate what that's all about. You know, if you can join us later in the day across the bridge, you're going to find some of the most iconic aircraft that tell the story of the first century of flight, of the people who were brave enough after thousands of years of dreaming about it to step into the sky and change the world that we lived in. Just outside this door, you're welcome to join to look at the Air Force One, the Concorde, the first 747, the first 737, and really understand how far we've come in just a little over 100 years. But what we're probably most proud of is to use those artifacts and those stories to rise. We got the first element behind you there just last week, one of the engine bells from the shuttle mock-up. And we'll be thrilled to be using that as an educational tool to tell the story of what people like Tom Jones and the other 350 people who flew on the shuttle accomplished in the last 30 years that now allows us to move forward. And we'll also be telling the story of the entrepreneurs, the commercial space folks, the explorers that will continue to push back the boundaries at NASA that will make that happen for all of us. We're really excited that that story has such a Seattle flavor to it. You know, when Lori Garver from NASA, the Deputy Administrator of NASA, was here for a Future Forum in December and introduced us to Planetary Resources and a lot of other young companies, we were struck with how many of them are here in Seattle. Lori used a way to think about this, that she said that probably an analogy that this is probably closer to what happened in the personal computer industry than anything else she could think of. There was a time in the late 70s when people would say to you, why would you want a personal computer? What would you do with it at home? And our paradigm changed a little since then. Well, today on the stage you're going to meet people who are rejecting the old paradigm of space and talking about how all of us will use it to change our planet. A lot of that's happening here in Seattle, as you'll learn today, and we're thrilled. Maybe we should start thinking of this as the Silicon Valley of space. Anyway, welcome. History will judge that.